There is a strange phenomenon that occurs when you begin to walk your own path, a quiet hostility that follows you like a shadow. You start noticing the subtle shifts in the faces of people you once called friends. Their smiles stiffen, their tone changes, their energy turns cold. It is not always open conflict. Sometimes it's silence that cuts the deepest. You feel the weight of unseen judgment pressing against your chest, and you begin to wonder, what did I do wrong? But the truth is, you did nothing wrong. You simply became a mirror, and they cannot bear to look into it. Hatred, in its purest psychological form, is projection. When someone hates you, they are not truly seeing you. They are seeing themselves reflected through your existence. You embody something that awakens what they have buried. Perhaps it's your confidence that exposes their insecurity, your authenticity that reveals their pretense, your growth that highlights their stagnation. And rather than confront those uncomfortable truths within, they turn outward, directing their discomfort toward you. You become the container of everything they reject in themselves. Human beings have always feared their own shadow, the darker aspects of their psyche that they deny and repress. It's easier to condemn someone else than to face one's own envy, inadequacy, or fear. And so they externalize it. You unknowingly become the stage on which their unhealed wounds perform. Hatred then is not a reflection of your flaws, but a confession of theirs. It is a psychological defense mechanism, an unconscious attempt to maintain the illusion of self-righteousness by disowning the parts of themselves that do not fit their image of goodness. But when you are the mirror, it does not feel enlightening. It feels heavy. Their projections cling to you like dust on glass. You feel misunderstood, misrepresented, perhaps even attacked for being something you never intended to be. The instinct is to explain yourself, to clean the reflection, to show them that their perception is wrong. Yet no amount of explanation can change the reflection in someone who refuses to look inward. They are not reacting to reality. They are reacting to the shadow they see in you. The moment you understand this, everything shifts. You realize that hatred is not always a punishment. Sometimes it is an unintentional acknowledgement of your light, because mirrors don't only reflect darkness, they reflect brilliance too. The more you grow, the more you shine, the more intense the projections become. Your light reveals what others conceal. And that revelation, to those still entangled in denial, feels like exposure. They feel naked before you, even when you say nothing. Every time you walk into a room with quiet confidence, those who secretly doubt themselves feel their fragility crack. Every time you speak truth without fear, those who live by deception feel their walls tremble. Every time you rise above manipulation, those addicted to control sense their power slipping. To them, your very existence is an affront, not because you've done harm, but because you remind them of who they are not. This is why hatred so often follows authenticity. Society rewards conformity and punishes individuality, for the individual threatens the collective illusion. When you stop pretending, when you stop wearing the masks others find comforting, you become disruptive. You tear through the social fabric that depends on mutual denial. And those who built their identity upon falsehood cannot forgive you for being real. To them, you are not an inspiration. You are a danger, because you awaken something they are not ready to face. But there is another layer to this mirror, one that turns inward. The hatred you attract also reveals something about you. It teaches you where your energy still seeks approval, where your ego still longs to be understood. It exposes your own attachments to validation. Because if you did not care about being liked, their hatred would have no hold on you. Every glare, every whisper, every dismissal becomes a test of your self-possession. Will you shatter under the weight of their projections, or will you learn to see them as reflections of universal human frailty? When you stop defending yourself against hatred, you begin to see its tragic beauty. It is pain disguised as anger. It is fear wearing the mask of contempt. Those who hate are often those who once loved, or those who wished they could love, but never learned. How? They despise in you what they abandoned in themselves. Their hostility is a form of mourning, the mourning of their own potential. And yet, the mirror cannot choose what it reflects. Its task is only to remain clear, unwarped, and still. That is your work, not to convince, not to retaliate, not to dim your light, but to maintain the clarity of your being. When hatred meets a calm, self-aware soul, it loses its power. It dissolves into the realization that nothing external can alter the truth of who you are. But this clarity comes at a cost. To be a mirror is to live among distortions, to remain reflective without absorbing, to see through the veil of emotion and still stand firm in your essence. It is a lonely path, because few can understand the serenity that exists beyond reaction. Yet it is the path of awakening, the path where every projection you endure teaches you how to polish the mirror of your soul. The more you understand the mechanics of hatred, the less personal it becomes. You start to see through people's aggression as if it were glass, fragile, transparent, revealing more about their inner chaos than your supposed faults. Hatred ceases to be a wound and becomes a window into the human condition. It shows you how frightened people are of truth, how desperately they cling to illusion, how violently they defend the self-image they cannot sustain. And in that understanding, you no longer respond with bitterness. You begin to observe, you begin to detach. You begin to realize that being hated is not the curse it once felt like. It is the proof that you are no longer participating in collective sleep. You have become a mirror, and every reflection you evoke is the evidence of awakening. There are wounds that do not bleed, and yet they drain us far more than any visible injury. You can feel them in the tension of your chest when you enter a room filled with hostility, in the sudden fatigue that washes over you after spending time with someone who secretly resents you, in the quiet anxiety that lingers after a conversation that felt harmless on the surface but somehow left you heavier. This is the reality of energetic contamination, a silent invasion of your inner world by the emotional residue of others. Every human being carries an energetic field, an invisible atmosphere of emotion, thought, and intent. It surrounds us, moves through us, and interacts with the energies of everyone we encounter. When you are surrounded by people who harbor hatred, envy, or resentment toward you, that energy does not simply vanish into the air, it seeps into your space, subtly influencing your emotions and thoughts. Their hatred becomes an invisible toxin, poisoning your vibration one encounter at a time. At first, you might not even notice it. You simply feel tired more often, less inspired, more doubtful of yourself. You question your instincts, second, guess your abilities, and begin to shrink without realizing why. But what's truly happening is not psychological weakness. It's energetic interference. When too many people direct negative intention toward you, even unconsciously, their energy tries to latch onto yours like dust onto glass. If your awareness is not strong, you begin to carry what does not belong to you. Energy is communication beyond words. It speaks through silence, through the eyes, through the subtle frequency of intention. Someone may smile at you while silently wishing for your failure, and your body will still register the dissonance. You will feel an unexplainable discomfort, a tightness, a signal that something in the exchange is not harmonious. The body always knows before the mind admits it. The more sensitive and self-aware you become, the more acutely you feel this contamination. Hatred, jealousy, and resentment are low vibrational states. They operate like emotional pollutants in the collective atmosphere. When they are directed toward you repeatedly, they can erode your spiritual immunity, the natural balance that protects your inner energy from external influence. This erosion happens when you start reacting, when you take things personally, when you internalize their hostility. Every time you engage in emotional defense, you unconsciously give their energy permission to enter your field. But the contamination is not just emotional, it's metaphysical. Every thought carries a frequency, and repeated thoughts of hostility form energetic imprints. These imprints can linger in spaces, objects, and especially in relationships. If you've ever walked into a room after an argument and felt the tension still hanging in the air, you've experienced it. The same happens on a subtle level when you interact with people who harbor hidden animosity. Their energy attaches itself to you like an unseen fog, and unless you consciously cleanse it, it stays, whispering lies into your mind, amplifying insecurities, and dulling your inner light. Energetic contamination is not superstition, it is the psychology of resonance. Energy seeks alignment. When two frequencies meet, the lower one often pulls the higher one down, unless the higher is conscious enough to remain centered. This is why hateful people crave your attention. They cannot generate light, so they feed on reaction. Every emotional response you give them, anger, sadness, defense, becomes food. It validates their projection and drains your strength. They don't need to defeat you physically. They simply need to destabilize your energy long enough for you to start doubting yourself. The human aura is like a living ecosystem. When it's vibrant and clear, it protects you effortlessly. But constant exposure to negative people, gossip, and envy creates cracks in that energetic boundary. You start carrying emotions that are not your own. You begin to feel the weight of thoughts that originate outside you. You absorb fragments of their chaos, their unhealed wounds, their spiritual exhaustion. Over time, your natural intuition blurs, and you lose the ability to distinguish between your own energy and that of others. This is how people lose their sense of direction without realizing it. They are not living their truth anymore. They are reacting to the energetic noise around them. They wake up anxious, not because something is wrong, but because they are holding the emotional residue of 10 other people. They feel creatively blocked, not because they lack inspiration, but because their energy field is cluttered with frequencies that are not aligned with their purpose. This is the unseen damage caused by hatred. Not the words, not the actions, but the vibration behind them. Awareness is the first step toward cleansing. Once you recognize that energy transfer is real, you begin to notice how often you allow it. Every argument, every defensive thought, Every attempt to justify yourself to someone who has already decided to misunderstand you, these are openings through which energy leaks. When you resist the urge to react, you close the gate. Silence becomes your shield, detachment your purification. But energetic contamination does not only come from enemies. It can come from those who love you but live in fear, from those who admire you yet secretly compete, from those who need you but resent your independence. Not all toxic energy is intentional, much of it is unconscious. People carry their pain like perfume, unaware of how strongly it lingers in the air around them. If you are an empathic or spiritually sensitive person, you absorb these frequencies easily. Your compassion becomes both your gift and your vulnerability. To protect your energy is not to isolate yourself from the world. It is to learn discernment. It is to know when you are feeling something that is truly yours and when you are merely reflecting the collective emotion of others. It is to cleanse your field daily through solitude, silence, nature, prayer, meditation, or any ritual that restores you to neutrality, because neutrality is power. When you are neutral, no vibration can attach to you. It passes through without leaving a mark. Every encounter leaves an energetic footprint, and when too many of those footprints come from hatred, envy, or resentment, they begin to form patterns that shape your destiny. You start attracting more of the same vibration you unconsciously carry. That is how energetic contamination becomes existential. It doesn't just affect how you feel, it influences what you manifest, who you meet, and where your path unfolds. To cleanse your energy, then, is to reclaim your destiny. It is to stop being a reflection of others' unresolved emotions and return to the frequency of your own truth. It is to understand that hatred cannot touch a soul that refuses to mirror it, that your inner vibration determines whether you absorb darkness or transmute it into light, that the energy you protect today decides the path your life will take tomorrow. There comes a moment in every person's evolution when life ceases to be comfortable. The smiles fade, the support disappears, and the people who once celebrated you begin to turn away. What you once called love becomes distance. What you once called belonging becomes silence. You try to understand why. What changed? What you did wrong? What invisible line you crossed? But what has truly happened is not a fall from grace, it is the beginning of an alchemical process. The soul, when ready for transformation, attracts fire. Hatred, rejection, and isolation are not accidents, they are the flames that refine your essence. Alchemy is not about turning metal into gold. It is about transmuting the dense material of human experience into spiritual light. The soul, in its longing for truth, calls forth circumstances that burn away everything false within it. This burning feels like loss, betrayal, humiliation, or failure, but it is actually purification. The universe, in its infinite intelligence, removes what no longer aligns with your higher vibration by forcing you to confront it through pain. Every hateful glance, every unkind word, every abandonment becomes part of your inner laboratory where your raw humanity is refined into consciousness. In the early stages, this feels unbearable. The fire consumes your illusions one by one, illusions of friendship, loyalty, recognition, control. You realize how fragile human affection can be, how conditional most relationships truly are. You see how quickly love turns into envy when you rise, and how easily admiration becomes contempt when you refuse to play small. It feels cruel, but in this cruelty lies sacred purpose. The soul cannot ascend while still attached to validation, and so life strips you bare until all you have left is yourself. Hatred is the flame, and your ego is the material being burned. Each time someone despises you without cause, your instinct is to fight back, to prove your worth, to be understood. But this reaction is precisely what binds you to the lower frequencies of human drama. The alchemical test begins when you resist that urge, when you allow the misunderstanding to stand, when you stop defending yourself, when you let your reputation burn rather than fight for its preservation. It is in that surrender that transformation begins. The ego melts, and what emerges is something purer, quieter, and infinitely stronger. People often mistake spiritual growth for the accumulation of wisdom, when in truth it is the disintegration of everything that is not wisdom. To grow spiritually is to die many small deaths. Deaths of attachment, of identity, of pride. Hatred becomes the catalyst for this death. It exposes what still reacts, what still craves approval, what still fears rejection. When you face hostility and no longer feel the need to explain yourself, you know that alchemy is working. Your inner gold is beginning to form. The soul's alchemical test is not a punishment, it is initiation. The world's rejection is the ritual fire that initiates you into deeper self-possession. When the people around you no longer see your worth, you are forced to discover it within. When the noise of opinions drowns out your voice, you learn to listen to the silence inside. The less you are understood, the more you understand yourself. The less you are loved by the world, the more you remember the unconditional love that exists beyond it. This is the transformation from dependence on external energy to the generation of inner light. Every insult becomes a refining tool. Every betrayal becomes a scalpel, cutting away what is false. Every failure becomes a vessel, emptying you of pride so truth can pour in. The soul's alchemy is ruthless but precise. It takes nothing that is essential and removes everything that is not. You will feel as though life is dismantling you, but it is only dismantling the mask that you mistook for your face. You are not being destroyed, you are being revealed. There is a strange beauty in this fire. Once you stop resisting it, you begin to see patterns. The people who hurt you were never enemies. They were instruments of transformation. That the hatred that surrounded you, it was never meant to crush you. It was meant to awaken the dormant fire within you. Every external trial mirrors an internal evolution. When someone tries to diminish you, it shows you where your power still depends on their acknowledgement. When someone rejects you, it reveals where your sense of belonging still rests on the approval of others. The test continues until the lesson is complete, until your worth, your peace, and your identity exist independent of anything external. In this crucible, your energy begins to change. The heaviness that once defined you starts to lift. You feel a strange stillness in the midst of chaos, a calm detachment that is not numbness, but clarity. The same words that once pierced you now dissolve before reaching your heart. You no longer seek revenge, because you see that hatred is its own suffering. You no longer seek validation, because you feel the quiet solidity of truth within. The world's rejection no longer defines you, it refines you. This alchemy continues in layers. Each cycle of pain peels away another mask. The process repeats until nothing false remains. You are purified by misunderstanding, cleansed by solitude, sanctified by disappointment. The darkness that once terrified you becomes a sacred space of renewal. The pain that once felt unbearable becomes the forge of your inner gold. You begin to see that the fire was never meant to destroy you. It was sent to reveal the indestructible within you. And so the soul continues its silent work. Every hateful gaze, every cold silence, every closed door becomes part of the transformation. You stand in the middle of it all, neither bitter nor broken, feeling the heat of the fire, and yet knowing it is holy. The hatred that once wounded you becomes your teacher. The rejection that once crushed you becomes your liberation. The fire that once burned you becomes the light that guides you through the unknown. There comes a phase in life when silence replaces company, when the laughter of old circles fades into echoes, and when the people who once claimed to understand you begin to look at you as if you've changed beyond recognition. You walk among crowds and yet feel unseen, unheard, untouched. At first, you call it loneliness. You try to fix it, to reconnect, to explain, to make yourself smaller so you can still fit into the spaces that once felt like home. But the more you try, the more distant everything becomes. What you are experiencing is not rejection, it is redirection. You are being removed from places that can no longer contain your frequency. This is the destiny of the isolated. Isolation is never random. It is the invisible hand of destiny separating you from the noise of the ordinary. When your soul begins to evolve, your energy begins to shift. And this shift disturbs the equilibrium of the environments that once felt comfortable. The conversations that once excited you begin to sound hollow. The people you once admired begin to feel foreign. The pleasures that once distracted you lose their taste. You are not losing interest in life, you are outgrowing a vibration. The universe, in its strange mercy, cuts the cords for you before you have the courage to do it yourself. It starts with subtle discomforts. You notice that certain spaces exhaust you more than they used to. You sense the hidden resentment in others' smiles. You catch the envy behind compliments. The atmosphere thickens when you speak your truth, and suddenly your authenticity feels like an offense. You begin to walk alone, not because you hate anyone, but because your energy no longer resonates with pretense. Those who have not evolved interpret your withdrawal as arrogance, as coldness, as betrayal. But in reality, you are simply aligning with your own becoming. Destiny often demands solitude as its first offering. Great transformations rarely occur in company. The seed grows in darkness. The butterfly transforms in isolation. The stars form in silent voids. The same law applies to the human soul. When you are chosen for a higher path, life takes away your comfort so you can no longer rely on it. The friendships that once defined you begin to fade. The recognition that once fueled you loses meaning. What you once thought was essential begins to dissolve. You are being emptied, not as punishment, but as preparation. The isolated soul undergoes a sacred dismantling. It is stripped of illusions, one layer at a time. You start seeing the truth about people, not the image they project, but the energy they carry. You feel the difference between connection and attachment, between company and resonance, between love and dependency. The clarity is painful because it shatters the fantasies you once lived by. But clarity is also freedom. Once you see clearly, you can no longer be deceived by appearances. You start to recognize that many relationships existed not from depth, but from shared wounds, not from understanding, but from mutual distraction. Isolation reveals what company conceals. When you are surrounded by others, You can easily confuse borrowed energy for your own. You feel alive not because you are in alignment, but because you are plugged into collective noise. When you are finally alone, the silence becomes unbearable because it reflects your true state. You begin to meet the parts of yourself that you've ignored. The anger, the grief, the unmet needs, the forgotten dreams. The silence becomes a mirror that shows you everything you tried to escape, and yet within that discomfort lies the seed of your real destiny. For destiny does not arise from comfort. It is born from confrontation with yourself, with your fears, with your emptiness. When no one is left to distract you, you begin to hear the voice of your soul. It does not shout, it whispers. It does not rush, it waits. In the stillness of isolation, you begin to realize that your path was never meant to be crowded. You were not designed to blend in. You were meant to walk edges others avoid. The loneliness you feel is not a curse. It is the space where divine instruction is written. In isolation, your energy recalibrates. The frequencies of others no longer dominate your field. You stop absorbing the emotions and opinions that once distorted your intuition. You begin to see the world not through borrowed beliefs, but through direct perception. This purity of vision gives birth to strength, the kind of strength that cannot be taught by validation or applause. You learn to stand in your own vibration, to generate your own peace, to protect your own light. And in that self-generated energy, destiny begins to reveal itself. Isolation is also a filter. It reveals who was connected to your essence and who was attached to your availability. When you withdraw, those who only valued your presence for what it gave them will vanish, while those who truly resonate with your soul will remain, even in silence. You will see that genuine connection does not demand constant contact. It survives absence. It grows through stillness. It understands the necessity of solitude. The isolation you once feared becomes the sacred boundary through which only truth can pass. There is a strange irony to this process. The more isolated you become, the more connected you are to everything real. The more you are misunderstood by people, the more you are understood by existence itself. Nature begins to speak to you. Intuition becomes language. Synchronicities become dialogue. The world that once felt chaotic begins to move in harmony with your energy. What you lost in companionship, you gain in alignment. What you lost in social comfort, you gain in cosmic direction. The path narrows, but it becomes luminous. Isolation reshapes your destiny because it rewires your energy. When your vibration stabilizes without external interference, you begin attracting experiences that match your authentic frequency. The noise of the world no longer distracts you from the subtle guidance of intuition. You stop chasing validation and start following resonance. You stop seeking safety in belonging and start finding power in alignment. Every loss becomes direction. Every silence becomes instruction. Every distance becomes protection. This is the destiny of the isolated, to be refined by silence, guided by energy, and transformed by solitude until they no longer seek the world, but carry it within them. There comes a point in the journey of awakening when you begin to see how much of your life force has been quietly drained by the world around you. You start to realize that fatigue is not always physical, that exhaustion often comes from the silent theft of your emotional and spiritual energy. You notice how much of yourself you have given away to arguments that changed nothing, to people who never listened, to trying to prove your worth in places that never saw it. And then a deeper realization dawns: no one can take your energy without your permission. The reclamation of energy begins the moment you stop offering your power to what does not deserve it. Energy is the currency of consciousness. Every thought, emotion, and interaction is an exchange. When you dwell on pain, you pay it with your attention. When you argue to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding you, you invest your power in futility. When you obsess over betrayal or rejection, you continue to feed the very forces that wounded you. Most people live unaware of this economy. They feel depleted, not realizing that they are spending their energy on narratives, people, and emotions that no longer serve their growth. Reclamation begins with awareness, with seeing where your energy flows and asking whether it flows with intention or reaction. Throughout life, you have been conditioned to pour your energy outward. You give it to relationships that drain you, to fears that paralyze you, to doubts that sabotage you. You scatter your vitality across countless moments of unnecessary concern. What they think of you, what might happen, what was lost, what should have been. Slowly, imperceptibly, your energy field becomes fragmented. Your spirit feels divided between the past and the future, between guilt and desire, between seeking and avoiding. This fragmentation is the real reason most people feel lost. It is not that they lack direction, it is that they lack presence. Their energy is everywhere except where they are. To reclaim energy is to call back all the fragments of yourself that have been scattered through emotional entanglement. It is to withdraw your attention from everything that drains it and reinvest it in consciousness itself. This is not an act of withdrawal from the world, it is an act of return to the center. The moment you stop reacting, you begin retrieving. Every reaction, every justification, every emotional overextension leaks energy. Every silence, every conscious boundary, every act of letting go retrieves it. What feels like detachment is actually restoration, the soul reassembling its power piece by piece. Hatred, envy, and hostility are not just emotional forces, they are energetic hooks. When someone projects negativity toward you, their energy seeks attachment through your reaction. If you retaliate, defend, or obsess, the hook embeds itself deeper. But when you observe without engagement, the hook finds no anchor. This is why silence is such a powerful weapon, not of aggression, but of sovereignty. When you refuse to feed chaos with your attention, you reclaim the energy that chaos thrives upon. The power once used for defense becomes available for creation. The attention once trapped in pain becomes available for presence. Reclaiming your energy also means withdrawing from emotional identities that no longer serve your evolution. Many people are unconsciously attached to their wounds because pain gives them a sense of identity. They wear betrayal as proof of loyalty, suffering as evidence of depth, rejection as a badge of uniqueness. But these identifications are energetic prisons. The moment you define yourself by your wounds, you become bound to the frequency of those wounds. To reclaim your energy, you must release the need to be the victim, the hero, or the misunderstood. You must step beyond narrative into neutrality. Neutrality is not indifference, it is mastery. It is the state in which energy flows freely without being trapped in emotional polarity. The reclamation of energy demands solitude because the process cannot occur amidst constant noise. You cannot gather yourself while continually leaking into others' chaos. Solitude acts as a magnetic field. It pulls back the pieces of energy you left behind in countless interactions. Every quiet moment becomes an act of retrieval. Every breath becomes a homecoming. You begin to sense your own field again, intact, radiant, grounded. The fatigue that once felt endless begins to lift, not because the world changed, but because you stopped feeding it with your life force. You also begin to notice how energy leaks through overexposure. The modern world encourages constant sharing, thoughts, emotions, plans, pains. Every time you expose your inner process before it solidifies, you release its potency into the collective field. True power grows in silence, it gestates in secrecy. When you protect your process, your energy consolidates. When you overshare, it disperses. The reclamation of energy is not about isolation but discernment. Knowing when to express and when to guard, when to speak and when to remain invisible. As you reclaim energy, your perception begins to change. You start feeling the subtle transactions happening in every encounter. You sense when someone's presence uplifts you and when it extracts from you. You recognize manipulation not through words, but through vibration. You no longer enter spaces unconsciously. You enter with awareness, deciding how much of your energy to give and when to withdraw it. Your empathy becomes intelligent. Your compassion becomes boundaried. Your love becomes selective, not because it is cold, but because it is sacred. The more you retrieve your energy, the clearer your field becomes. The emotions of others no longer stick to you. The opinions of the world no longer infiltrate your peace. The energetic noise that once clouded your intuition fades, revealing clarity that feels almost supernatural. You begin to move differently, slower, deliberate, unshakable. You realize that true power has nothing to do with control and everything to do with containment. Power is not about dominating others, it is about not being dominated by their frequency. The reclamation of energy transforms destiny itself. When your energy is fragmented, your manifestation is chaotic. You attract people and experiences that match the scattered pieces of your vibration. But when your energy is unified, your destiny aligns. Opportunities arise that mirror your coherence. Relationships appear that resonate with your wholeness. Your path clears not through external effort, but through energetic integrity. You become magnetic not because you chase, but because you embody. To reclaim your energy is to reclaim your life. It is to gather the scattered essence of who you are and draw it back into the center of your being. It is to stop pouring yourself into battles that do not matter and to begin investing in the only kingdom that ever truly existed, the inner one.